Hey, it's Deborah Bringleson. If you're a CEO or an owner of a company, or if you're out there in the sales world, I'm here today for some real relief, to give you some real relief. You know, things are tougher than ever. If you're running a company or a sales division, you're under more pressure than ever. There are crises happening in the world that are distracting people. There are more messages out there. Your deal buyers are being inundated, and I want to give you some real relief. But first of all, I want to start with a fact that we all have to recognize, and that is that 90 to 90% of your revenue is down the drain before you even start. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to hear that, and I'm really sorry to tell you, but that is true. So when we identify buyers in audiences, we survey them, whether they're sitting in an audience or whether they're online, surfing the net, looking around. People are only in the market, about 3% of them are in the market to buy a product at any time. You may have heard of the buyer's pyramid that comes from Chet Holmes International. It's something that I use with all my clients. About 3% of any audience is in the market to buy at one time. So when you survey an audience and you say how many people are in the market to buy a washing machine or web design services or whatever it is that you may be selling, only about 3% of them are going to raise their hand and say, I'm in the market to buy right now. Hey, look, pull out a piece of paper and a pen, and I'm going to walk you through the math on this. It's simple math. Deborah doesn't do complicated math, so it's going to be really simple math, but it's going to help you understand where you're losing leads and revenue, and it's going to help you understand how to turn that around. I'm going to give you my number one strategy for turning that around. Companies all around the world are using this strategy to increase their revenue 100%, some even to more than 3,500% in 12 months. I'll give you a really quick example. So I worked with this client a couple of years ago who sold houses, realtor. And for the 12-month period before she and I started working together, she made no money. Literally $0 came in during that 12-month period. And we started working together, and we talked about how her buyers, the people she was talking to, they were not interested in buying a house. They had a house. And so we looked at what they really were interested in, and we started talking to them about that. And what we discovered is that they had something else on their mind. Her ideal buyers, the ones who they have money, they pay, they're excited about what you're offering. They weren't interested in houses, but they were interested in something else. And I'll get to that in just a minute because it's going to blow your mind. But when we started talking to them about that, she increased her revenue 3,546% in 12 months. Which for her turned out to be about $602 million. So pull out your piece of paper and your pen, and let's go through this. So remember I said about 3% of the market is interested in what you're offering right now. 97% of them are not interested at all. So when you look at the market, the first 3%, they're buying now, but where's all your competition? That they're going after that same 3%. The next 7%, they may be open to the idea, but they're not necessarily buying now. Maybe in 6 months from now, but not now. The next 90%, the first 30%, they're not even thinking about it. It hasn't occurred to them to look for your product or service. And the next 30%, they think they're not interested. I don't think so. And then the bottom 30%, they're not interested at all. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to draw a triangle on your piece of paper and draw a line across the top at about where 3% would be. Those are the people buying now. Now draw a line down at about where 10% would be. Those are people, they're open to it, but they're not actively looking. Then the remaining 90% divide into 3 equal portions. The 30% who aren't thinking about it, the 30% who think they're not interested, and then the bottom 30% who are definitely not interested. So when you are going out to market, you're talking to that top 3% who are actually actively interested in what you're offering, but you're not talking to anyone else. So 90% of your ideal market isn't hearing you at all. Now let's talk about the math on this. What if you could get the top 10%? What would that do to your revenue? Or what if you could get even the top 40%? So right now you're getting 3% of your market. That's where you're making your money. 97% of your money is down the drain before you even start. But what if you could get down into just that top 30%? They think they're not interested, but if you spoke to them about what they cared about, they actually would be. So let's use some simple math. As I said, Deborah doesn't do complicated math. I hire people to do that, people who are good at that. But let's talk about some simple math. So let's say that you're talking to the top 3% of your market, and that equals 100 leads per month for you, right? So, and let's just, to make it easier, let's say that we're talking to the top 10%. Let's be generous. We're talking to the top 10% of the market. So that's 100 leads for you. If you close 30 of those leads, 100 leads, into buyers, and each buyer represents $1,000, that's 30 times 1,000, that's $30,000 a month, right? So what if you could increase that 10% and get down into that 30%, the first 30%, so you were getting into 40% of your market? What would that mean to you? And I want you, as we're going through this simple math, I really want you to be thinking about your personal math for your company. So you've gone from 10% to 30%, and that equals an additional, 90 buyers? So you now have 120 buyers, which at $1,000 each, that represents $120,000. So you go from $30,000 a month to $120,000 a month. That's actually pretty easy to do. So the client that I was telling you about, $0 in 12 months, $602 million 12 months later, what did she do? Well, we decided to do research on her ideal buyers. And it's, when I talk about ideal buyers, most people say, well, I have an avatar of my ideal buyer. Okay, sure you do. I'm not talking about age and gender. Sure, those are nice things to know. I'm talking about knowing what they really care about. And when we did an analysis of her ideal buyers, we discovered that they didn't care about buying a house. They cared about risk that they had in their own lives. This group of people, her ideal buyers, were at an increased risk for diabetes, heart disease. Their kids were at a higher risk, a 3,000% increased risk for teen drug use. And so we started talking to her ideal buyers about those things. So when we first started working together, she had a team who had put together this amazing website. It, had curtains billowing, and it had won lots of awards, and it was really, really beautiful. It had made her no money at all. So we shut down that website, and we put together a website that talked about diabetes, heart disease, teen drug use, and her team was appalled. I was crass. They told her I was crass, that, the website that I put together was ugly and wouldn't win any awards. Well, here's something that every business owner needs to understand. Your marketing materials and I prefer the term strategic messaging. Your messaging materials aren't there to be beautiful and win awards. They're there to make money. So we put together this website, and our brochures talked about how to cut risk of diabetes and heart attack, and we talked about teen drug use and what are things that families could do to support their teens. And do you know what happened? Her ideal buyers started coming to her. They would see her website, or they would pick up a brochure at an event, and it was startling to them. What is this realtor doing talking about diabetes and heart disease? And because this was something that they knew that they were at risk of, they were far more interested in knowing about that than about granite and lighting and all of the traditional things that you talk about in real estate. They didn't care about that. They had a house. So what happened was they started reaching out to her. And you know, it's so much easier to make a sale when your ideal buyer is coming to you rather than you hunting them down. Think about what happens when you're hunting something down. If you're out in the wild, and I'm not a hunter, but you know, think about you're hunting something down. What's it going to do? It's going to run from you. But when you're talking to someone about something that they care about, when you are interested in making their life and their business potentially better, what are they going to do? They're going to lean in and listen. Hey, this person isn't interested in getting their hand in my wallet only. They're actually interested in helping me make my life better. So when we started talking about things that they cared about, they would come to us for advice. And when they did that, we could talk to them about how our houses also made their life better. So yes, you do have to make a connection. You can't just say, well, you know, I'm selling this web design service, so I'm going to talk about diabetes and they're going to buy. No, you have to walk them down the path of understanding how what they care about and you're talking about connects to making their life better, connects to their product, your product and service, and their need. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, the first thing that you want to do is you really want to understand your buyer. I love to play this game with my clients. It's called Max Map, and we map it all out. So what are they caring about? What are they worried about? They're not worried about your product or service. They're actually worried about three things: money, risk, and time. So when you think about your ideal buyer, and what I always say is, you might want to write this on your paper, think about 5 people or companies who are currently your ideal buyer. Maybe write them down. Who are they? And build a case around those 5. What do they have in common? What are the big stressors that they have in common? So let's talk about maybe people who are in the real estate industry. What are the big stressors that they have? Well, one of the big stressors is that there are all these online services now that help people bypass the real estate industry. So what are some of the things that they're laying in bed worried about? Well, they need to make commission. They need to put their kids through school. Costs are going up. There's, you know, in a booming economy, there's all these people flooding the market. So how do you help them? How do you help them make their life better? Or let's talk about maybe people in the supply chain industry that, you know, they've got stressors on the top. They've got bosses who are trying to, you know, squeeze more out of their day. They've got people that they're supplying who want to have their problem solved. They've got all these things that are pushing them from both ends. How do you make their life better? When you think about your ideal buyer, the people that you're trying to sell to, and sometimes you're selling through them to get to the ultimate buyer, but how do you help them solve their problem? So when getting back to the story of the realtor, what we did was we armed our salespeople with information about diabetes, heart disease, how being in nature helped lower the risk of some of these stress-related illnesses. Did you know that there's actual science behind if you're out in nature or if you're spending time by the sea or, you know, hugging a tree, you actually reduce your risk of heart attack equal to some of the most prevalent heart disease drugs on the market today. So we armed them with this kind of information, and it caused them to want to lean in and learn more. So my number one recommendation to you to start switching this around for you and start capturing that 97% of revenue that you're not capturing right now is, first of all, think about what your ideal buyer truly cares about. Remember, it's money, risk, and time. Okay, it's not your product and service. It's not the fact that you're a family-run business that's been around for 150 years. It's not that you love your clients and customers and treat them like family. None of that is actually important to any of them. All right? What's really important is what you can do for them. If you think of they're over here with these problems, and the joy of solving those problems is over here, what are you doing in between for them? How are you filling that gap for them? That's how you reach down into that 90 to 97% of clients, buyers that you're not capturing now. And what that means for you is an increased revenue of potentially 90 to 97%. So, you know, I've worked with companies around the world, Discovery, small companies like the Super Dentist, to huge companies. And what I know for certain, having done this for almost 30 years now, it's very easy to capture at least an additional 40 to 50% of your revenue. That's easy. So think about it this way. Let's say your revenue last year was $1 million. If you could 4x that, if you could go from $1 million to $4 million, what would that mean to your company, to your life, to your family? And bigger companies, you know, what if your revenue is $100 million and you're able to increase it to $400 million? What would that do for you? This is my number one strategy. I use it with every single company that I work with. I've been doing it for 30 years. It has never failed me, and now it's yours. So if you have any questions, shoot me a message and let me know. I'm happy to answer your questions. And head over to quantumsuccessacademy.org, and I will give you whatever information that you need and a lot more tips. I look forward to talking with you. Take care.